certain time constraints. So good morning, everybody. My name is Todd Tuckey. I'm president of the Barrie Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to thank everybody for joining the Barrie Chamber and Sandbox today for our free webinar on virtual town hall. So over the past several weeks, every level of government has come together as Team Canada to ensure that Canadian families and businesses are supported through this economic implications of the COVID-19. They are continuing to send feedback on the supports already announced and are now asking for input on planning the recovery. They recognize that every sector and every community will have unique needs and that we want to hear from businesses now to ensure that they can come through this together. The situation continues to evolve daily, and this way of two-type communication is critical to successful recovery of our economy. So I will introduce each of our panelists shortly, then ask them to provide a very brief update for you from their level of the government, after which we'll proceed directly to the Q&A. We did accept questions in advance of today's session, and we encourage you to submit yours as well. To submit a question, please choose the Submit Question to Moderator option within your Zoom platform and type out your question. I will read the questions directly to the panelists for a response. So this morning, we'll start off with Mayor Jeff Lehman. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks very much, Todd, and to everybody on the call. Here we are in week 7 of this unprecedented and overused word situation. But I guess as the status stands today, a couple of things that I would say off the top by way of context. The number of cases in Simcoe Muskoka on a provincial level, when you compare it to the rest of the province, is very low. That is very good news. Our healthcare system has not been overwhelmed, and in fact, Doug and I were just on a call with RVH, and we're starting to understand where they think things are going as well. So the overall critical care situation is quite good here. In the GTA, it's a different story. Cities like Brampton, Mississauga, Toronto have 3 or 4 times the rate of COVID in their populations that we do here in Barrie. And that is putting considerable pressure on the system there. So province-wide, and I know Doug, Downey, or Andrea may speak to this when they get on, there is a whole of system approach that says we are still in a situation where we could need a lot of that capacity, even though we're starting to see very hopeful signs in terms of the curve flattening and the number of cases daily in the province going down. So while we're probably on the downslope of the pandemic and moving now towards reopening in the coming weeks and months, it is still going to be weeks, and we've heard the Premier consistently messaging that as he's continued to show leadership in reminding everybody in Ontario to follow the advice of public health and that we have to keep up this distancing stuff a little while longer. All of that being said, while the city continues to take steps to try and encourage distancing and so forth, we've continued our communications. We've had a few changes to service levels. We are now very much looking ahead to what can we do as a community, the city of Barrie, to rally our local economy. And our plan for that has 3 steps. First of all, private construction and investment, development, and home building. Second, public construction, which is how we build our civic capacity, our services, and our public projects. And third, a sector-based recovery strategy. And that's actually going to be at City Council on Monday night. So one of the things you're going to be hearing City Council talking about this coming Monday is that strategy for recovery. And we're focusing on 6 sectors: manufacturing, construction, small business and services, food and accommodation, and the tourism sector. And as well, we're going to look at the downtown, because the downtown has a number of unique issues, not a sector of the economy, but a location, and one with a large number of independent businesses and the opportunity to do some things differently to support that community coming back. So over the next month, we will be reaching out through the Mayor's Economic Support Task Force to all of the industry associations and working with our incredible partners like the Chamber and the Sandbox of Georgian College to consult with each of the sectors in Barrie: Tourism Barrie, the manufacturers, Barrie Construction Association, Simcoe County District Home Builders Association, to talk about how we can come back fast once the restrictions are starting to be lifted. The other 2 aspects of the plan, so that's the sector recovery plan. We're going to go and consult over the next 2 weeks. It will come back to City Council in the first week of June. And what you should see in that plan is a series of local initiatives and programs which can help each of our sectors come back. Now, the overall situation is a good point for me to mention. As you've probably seen in the media over the last 2 weeks, the situation of municipalities is very bad when it comes to our finances. We're talking about $1 billion deficit for the City of Toronto, the City of Barrie. We've had 4 of our major revenue lines go to zero, and that represents about 20% of our revenue. Municipalities are laying off staff. No other level of government is laying off staff. And in fact, the private sectors receive wage subsidies, so they don't have to lay off staff, but we're not eligible. So not to raise the alarm around critical services, we are going to keep maintaining all of those critical services: police, fire, roads, water, wastewater, transit, paramedics. All of those services will continue to be funded. And the City of Barrie is in relatively good financial shape. But we're bleeding revenue, so it won't be the City of Barrie that's offering bailout money in the millions of dollars to companies. We can't afford it. But what we can do is work, as we have been with our local associations and businesses, to try and create local initiatives to come back quickly. The other 2 pieces of recovery that I'll just mention quickly and then hand over the floor will be the public and private sector construction. So City Council got back to work last week. We're pretty early, going back to our regular schedule after about a 6-week break. We are processing planning applications, and in fact, last Monday you saw us approve the YMCA and the HIP development on the former Prince of Wales school site. That is 50 stories between 3 buildings, so 2 20-story buildings and 1 10-story building, and then the YMCA. So that's a very, very large project for the west end of our downtown. Was approved by council. And the reason we're going to start moving through the planning process is to build up a supply of projects that are ready to go as the pandemic eases. That's on the private side. And the home building side, similarly in the south end, in the annex lands, we're moving forward with those planning applications so that our home building community construction can really ramp up where it's had to slow down or stop. On the public sector side, we anticipate that the federal government, the provincial government, hopefully as well, will be funding infrastructure. Similar to the last 2 or 3 recessions, there will be federal infrastructure programs which can help municipalities take big steps forward and get more work done in our communities as a way of stimulating the economy. And the City of Barrie is preparing our list of shovel-ready projects, and we're trying to fast-track some planning work so that we've got even more that are ready to go when the call comes. I probably said more than enough, but those are the 3 parts of our agenda, our economic recovery agenda, and watch for more on that in the media and at City Council on Monday nights. Thanks very much.
Excellent, thanks, Jeff, appreciate that. So next up, again, we would have had Andrea Kanjan, our MPP for Barrie Innisfil, and you know, the good news is, well, bad news is she can't be with us. The good news is they're having a caucus meeting this morning with the Premier to discuss the aspects of reopening. And you're going to hear some announcements on that today. Again, we really don't have much information on that yet. And then next up would have been Doug Downey, and Doug's run a little behind. He's tied up in another meeting. He has sent off a message. So hopefully he'll be able to join us shortly so we can get things from a provincial aspect. And now we will turn it over to Mr. Doug Shipley, MP, Barrie, Springwater, Oro-Medonte. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks, Todd. I like the way you said that with some enthusiasm. I felt like I was about to jump out in the ice and play a game there. So thank you to everybody for joining us this morning. Nice to see Mayor Lehman and my counterpart in the south end, John Brassard. Todd, I think these are always useful. I'm shocked when you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, our last one was almost a month ago. Time seems like it's standing still, but it's flying by, which is a strange thing to say, but every day's over and over, and it is Friday to remind everybody. So at least we have a weekend ahead of us.
Really?
Yeah. So I just wanted to say hello to everybody. Last time we talked, as I said, was a month ago. There's been a lot of programs from the federal government introduced, many. There's many programs out to now assist people, to help businesses, but we are aware there are still some gaps. We are continuing to meet. Last week I was in Parliament. John was there with me. We were 2 of only 14 Conservatives across the country. The room is set up to hold 330 people. We were definitely lots of social distance in the chambers. There was only, I think, approximately 40 members total. in a very large room. So everybody maintained a good distance from each other. But we are maintaining to make some changes to legislation. We are doing what we can to help, but we know there are still some gaps out there because I continue to get emails and calls, and we will continue to try and work with that. Since this is a chamber call, Todd, I would just like to mention that it's been really heartwarming. I know that's a bit of an overused term, but to see just how much businesses in and around the Barrie area, Oro, Springwater, Medonte, have stepped up to help. This past week, I've had the opportunity of touring 2 different facilities that I would like to make mention of. The first would be Molded Precision Components out in Oro, who are normally making automotive parts, and they have stepped up greatly with the help of the municipality of Oro-Medonte. They have completely shut down their automotive line and are doing manufacturing of shields and protective devices now. They did get a grant from the federal government. They have moved all of their inventory into the Oro Arena to make space. So that was a great benefit that the municipality of Oro, and I met Mayor Hughes out there and they did that. And I know Mayor Lehman and Barrie, him and I have been talking about some other projects to try and help companies in the same idea, but they moved all their inventory into the arena of Oro. Also, they have an empty fire hall out there because Oro recently built a new fire station. The old one was sitting empty. And Mayor Hughes also gave that extra space to them with no charge whatsoever. This really is an all hands on deck. We keep talking about it, but those are actually examples to show what's going on. And it's a great project out there that hopefully will even grow into more jobs and fruition down the road. But more importantly, they're providing the important PPE equipment that's required for across Canada and the world. And secondly, I got to tour just yesterday with South Medic, and that was a real eye opener. That is just their office is right around the corner from mine, and I'll be honest, I had never been in their facility. I had a great tour with Lee in there yesterday, and it was just fantastic to see. They are just booming. In fact, when I got there, there was a group of about 15 or 20 youngerish people waiting outside, and they were new people starting to work there. So South Medic and some of these companies have really stepped on board. They're running 24/7 right now. And it was really encouraging to see also in there was a lot of employees in there with Napoleon t-shirts on. Napoleon has actually lent a lot of their employees to South Medic. Napoleon had been slowing down and wasn't doing much in the barbecue industry and the industry they do. And they actually had lent South Medic employees. So I went into one room and there must have been 20, 25 employees sitting there putting together safety equipment, and they were all from Napoleon, which is just a fantastic a sight to see, and it's showing how everybody really is truly come together. There's no competition right now. Everybody's involved in doing what's right to try and save as many lives and safety as we can. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sure my counterpart John Brassard has some things to add, but thanks Todd for putting this together, and thanks everybody for working so hard. Maintaining your social distance and safe and is definitely working. We had a nice meeting this morning with RVH, and the numbers are holding steady. It looks like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And as Todd mentioned, we know our provincial counterparts are discussing how and when to reopen, and we're all looking forward to hearing that, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and thank you for your patience over the last 7 weeks. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. Up next, our current longest standing MPP, Mr. John Brassard, Barrie Innisfil. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Todd. And thank you as well to the Chamber for once again hosting this. Good to be on with Doug and Jeff. And I know that Andrea and Doug Downey are going to be joining us as soon as they can. As you mentioned, they're sitting in a caucus meeting right now, trying to get a sense of what reopened Ontario will look like. I do want to start off by saying, though, as a community that is highly connected to our Canadian military, obviously our thoughts are with the Canadian Forces today and the 6 members of HMCS Fredericton, 1 confirmed killed, 5 still missing in the helicopter crash this morning. And, certainly our thoughts are with their families and with the members of our Canadian military who play a strong part in the local Chamber of Commerce as well, Todd, as you know. So I was on the call with RVH this morning. There was some, as the mayor said and Doug said, some very encouraging data that we're starting to see locally. So, we in saying that, however, we must remain cautiously optimistic and still ensure that we are taking all the precautions that we need to in order for these numbers to continue to improve. But it was really good to hear that RVH has not just got a handle on the situation, but is proactively working to ensure that if there is the potential of a second wave or even a third wave, that they're prepared for that. And I know that their PPE supply is manageable, and that is in no small part to not just the local supply chain, but also others who, as Doug said, have retooled to supply RVH. So I really want to thank everyone for that. Doug touched on a lot of things that are happening at the federal level, and we continue to work collaboratively, all parties do, in a nonpartisan way to try to make sure that individuals and businesses are looked after with some of the programs that have been announced. There are still many gaps within those programs, and I can tell you that as we talk to local businesses, not just local, but right across the country, we're working through our shadow ministers, our finance critics, our small business critics, our employment and workforce development critics to really make sure that those gaps are identified. I'm really pleased actually that in many cases, those gaps have been improved on, and the Canadian Emergency Wage Benefit is an example of that, where the government proposed 10% in the beginning, and then through the advocacy, as I've mentioned before, of the Chamber, of the Canadian Federation of Business and independent or opposition parties, we've seen that come up. The other thing too is the student benefit. We saw improvements to that in the legislation as Parliament sat this week, because it has been a concern for local businesses, the opportunity for young people to continue working while collecting this benefit. And so we made sure that there were some measures that were put in place so that businesses had the opportunity to hire young people. One of the things that we've been focused on a lot, and I know Doug has as well, is on the supply chain, making sure that local manufacturers have the connection and resources that they need to connect with Health Canada, as well as Procurement Canada. So we've seen some success on the local level. There's been some, what I would classify as non-successful connections that have been made, but we're continuing to push Procurement Canada as well as Health Canada to ensure that local suppliers are within that supply chain. The other thing that I want to address as well is that in this Team Canada approach, I can tell you that as an opposition, we have struck a committee led by our deputy leader to work on some of the things that Mayor Lehman talked about, and that is recovery. And what does recovery look like? And so we are going to be proposing to the government some measures, and and Mayor Lehman, of course, I'm anxious, and I know Doug will be as well, to hear what some of the consultation is going to look like, because we can implement that as part of our plan to work with the government on what recovery is going to look like. And so we're trying to be as proactive as we can, because it will be all hands on deck. We're hearing some very disturbing numbers from the parliamentary budget officer, and I can't overstate the impact that this is having, not just on the economy, but the finances of government. We know, for example, that the PBO report came out yesterday and talked about $251 billion in deficits. And just to put that in context, the federal government has spent, and over the course of the last month, almost as much as what the federal budget is in a year. And it's been done to support individuals and businesses, but government alone will not lead this economic recovery. We are going to need the power of Canadian business and the Canadian economy to help us get out there. So to get out of this crisis. And so we're going to have to work together. Municipalities are at the front line, as the mayor said. I know that LUMCO has really expressed deep concern about the impact that this is having on municipalities. The city of Barrie, for example, with revenues, the city of Toronto, and that's happening right across the country. So, as much as government is going to have to continue to support the recovery, municipalities are going to be at the front line on that. And I know that there is a significant amount of money for infrastructure that still hasn't been spent yet. And we have to make sure that that infrastructure money is spent equitably if municipalities are going to help us recover from this COVID-19 pandemic and really start the boom to the Canadian economy. We have to make sure that that money is spent equitably across the country so that every region of this country can work their way out of this. And so I can assure you that we are working together. The next phase is going to be important because, you know, if there is an expectation that there's going to be a second or third wave, testing, tracing, and isolation becomes important as well. But I'm very pleased to hear that the provinces have talked about a recovery plan and to get the economy going, and I'm anxious to hear more about that later today from the Premier. I know Alberta has really taken some strides to move forward, and I expect that Ontario will as well. And so again, thank you to the Chamber for supporting this. Thank you to the others for participating, and I look forward to the questions. And if anybody does have any questions that we're unable to answer at this point, I have a staff member that is on this call, and we'll make sure that we get back to you with the right answer. Thanks, Todd.
Great, thanks, John. Yeah, it's interesting to see how all three levels of government have appeared to come together seamlessly during this, again, difficult time. And you know, I know there's concerns in all different aspects. I know Mayor Lehman, a week or so ago, you said that the city is looking at roughly $60 million deficit. And I know a lot of impact there, especially in regards to charities and things. Unfortunately, it was just announced today that the Dragon Boat Festival will now be canceled. We've lost the Barrie Fair. Kempenfest is on the verge. A lot of charities are going to be scrambling too, and their money goes back into the local community, and it's kind of tough. But we'll segue right into that, and we will welcome our MPP, Mr. Doug Downey, Barrie, Springwater, Oro-Medonte. Perfect timing, Doug. Welcome.
Thanks, Todd. I appreciate it. And I was just in a cabinet meeting, and so I apologize for being late. And Andrea is in a caucus meeting, which I'm foregoing because we decided one of us should be here to update people and make sure that they have a sense of what's happening. And as you were just alluding to, the levels of government are working very well. And I had a meeting yesterday with all the attorney generals across the country to get an insight into what they're doing to help inform what we're doing. And it's, as the people watching will know, as we went into under the emergency orders, we then had to decide which businesses had to close down and put some restrictions around them. That same committee, which I sit on, where there are 6 of us, are having vigorous discussions about how we unlock and how we open. The Minister of Finance put out the pathway, and as he says, it is a roadmap. It is not a calendar. It's then down to the other committee to start talking about calendar. So obviously I can't say too much about the discussions within the committee, but I would watch the Premier's announcement today for some insight. That being said, I'm sure that Doug Shipley and John Brassard and Mayor Lehman have already said thank you for everybody doing their part to help us through this, working together. It is making a huge difference. And as John was just saying, the testing is important. You'll see the numbers posted, what time is it now? In 3 minutes, saying that we are up to 16,000 tests yesterday. That's quite a scale up from 5,000 that we were struggling with last month. So we're seeing progress on that. And I know that we're time limited, so I'm going to stop there and we can get to the questions.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate you joining us. And you know, if times are a little tough and you need a couple of bucks for a razor, I'll chip in and help you out there.
Well, I thought Jeff and I were in some sort of competition, but I don't know where it just went.
Yeah, Jeff cleaned up nicely. All right, with that, everybody, we will slide into our first question. So it is, will the province look at preventing evictions during COVID-19? Since CERB will not be available till mid-May, and there is no guarantee that landlords will register and offer it to tenants, what will be done to ensure small businesses are supported since rent is still being collected? I'll throw that out there. Whomever wants to run with it.
Well, we can start with, I presume that's a commercial question as opposed to a residential question, because
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so like so many things, the important part is to have a conversation with the landlord. There is a federal provincial program that Doug or John may want to touch on as well that is helping with rent. And there are some shifting on that as they're ironing out the kinks. So what you heard even 4 days ago isn't necessarily what the program is today, which is good because there's feedback coming back in. But that helps take the pressure off. If the landlord is agreeable to it, then the federal government puts in 25%, the province puts in 25%, the tenant puts in 25%, and the landlord puts in 25% or forgoes 25%. And there are a lot of details around that, but that's generally the concept.
The challenge right now is that rents were due yesterday and many of them are due today. And so I've been hearing from local businesses just how challenging that is. The program as it stands now is not expected to roll out until mid-May, which means that many local businesses at this point are going to have to pay. And that's assuming, of course, with the program that the landlord buys into it. So there are some challenges with it. There's no question about it. As Doug says, there's been some evolution of the program, and but it's causing a lot of concern among local businesses and the landlords. Like Doug said, having a conversation with the landlords is critical because there has to be a partnership here. But we also understand that the landlords have their obligations as well. So we have to be both sides have to be very empathetic until this program kicks in, and it will be eligible for April, May, and June when it is opened up. But I can tell you, there's a lot of anxiety among local business owners. I've been hearing about that this week.
Great, thanks, guys. Also, on a quick note there, the Chamber received a notice this morning from a large landlord in Barrie, which is Kirkwood Properties, and Kirkwood said that they will be participating in the program and they'll be dealing with the individual tenants on a one-on-one basis. So that was good news to hear that from them. Okay, we'll slide into the next question. Are talks ongoing to figure out supports for people who are still falling between the cracks? Small business people who are making a bit too much money to qualify for CERB, but not enough to pay commercial leases, etc. Is there still hope for them to get some assistance?
Doug, you want to talk about that, and I can piggyback, Shipley?
Yeah, just quickly, yes, is the short answer. We are still advocating every day. We have our lines of communication, our chain. We know there's some gaps. When the plans are first rolled out, things are being rolled out very quickly, and announcements are being made with not sometimes all the details behind them. And we are the official opposition, and part of our job is to try to make sure those gaps are filled. So we get emails and calls every day. And I say we, it's John and I'm sure Doug is too, and I'm sure Jeff is too, but direct them to us and we'll do whatever we can. We do have calls, numbers, emails we can make. We're trying to push for people. We do see those gaps. I am hearing about it. And quite frankly, sometimes we're surprised by new calls too. We think we've got everything covered. We think we know everybody who's being missed. And then someone will call us and you'll say, you're right, it's being missed. So yes, we are continuing to fight every day for those gaps that are out there. And some of them have been met because of some of the pushes we've done. So we are still continuing to fight for that. John,
it's been I mean, the programs, like Doug said, have rolled out very, very quickly. And oftentimes when those gaps are identified, it's not just the opposition parties that are identifying, because we're hearing from our constituents and our businesses, but the government identifies it because they are making changes to the program. And I'll give you an example. As I said off the top, the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy started at 10%. And if not for the advocacy of the Chamber, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business and opposition parties, then it may not have moved up to that 75% that we're seeing right now. The student benefit is another example. That wasn't a benefit in the beginning, but there was a lot of advocacy and push towards the government to do that. So they announced that. There were even changes made last week in the legislation that were negotiated with opposition parties. So as much as those gaps exist, and I know sole proprietors, I just yesterday I had 2 phone calls from sole proprietors who don't who fall in the cracks when it comes to not just the emergency business loan, but also the wage subsidy and the rent subsidy. So there are still things that we need to improve on, and I can assure you that every time that I hear, and I'm sure Doug and Jeff feel the same way, that we're letting the proper authorities, in some cases, directly to the ministers, to let them know just how much these individuals and businesses are falling through the cracks and how improvements need to be made to the programs that have been announced.
Great, thanks, John. Next question will probably be directed right over to Mayor Lehman himself. With the Downtown Barrie construction moving ahead much more quickly, how much earlier is it anticipated that the project will be completed? Jeff?
Yeah, thanks for that. Short answer is we think about 6 weeks faster. We're hoping to do even better than that. So the piece that was supposed to not be done until July, which is east of 5 Points to Owen, is almost finished. It may not look like it, but actually the tree pits are going in now, and that's one of the last things before we put in sidewalks and do the surfacing. We started Maple to Mary on Monday. And the hope is that the third phase, which was going to run in the fall until, sort of from September to November, we can actually get that done quite a bit earlier. So we were also trying to work the construction around the actual location of patios so that we didn't interrupt the patio season. We're hoping if we can move through the 2 phases that are underway now. We're basically doing 2 phases at once right now because there's so little traffic and because most of the businesses are closed. We can get that done actually before opening up, June, July, or when we're partially opening up. Then we can have those areas that actually be ready, which could actually help with distanced seating areas. I mean, this is something you have to start thinking about as you think about recovery. If we're going to have patios, that maybe the tables aren't going to be as close together anymore. Maybe there are going to be actual physical changes that are required, and we saw the Premier and the province start to come out with some of those guidelines yesterday. So we're trying to get the construction done really fast. The short answer is we think about 6 weeks, which moves us back to the early part of the fall instead of not being done until November.
Great, thanks, Jeff. All right, next question. As the economy reopens, if daycares and schools remain closed to protect children, will there be protection put in place for the jobs of employees who rely on these services to return to work?
So that's a provincial question, and talking about the intersection of schools and parents and how that's working is top of mind. So rest assured that it's not. I have a 12-year-old, so look, we're all living that reality, and we have to make sure that those pieces are taken care of. So all I can really say at the moment, who knows what the ultimate decision will be, but certainly that is a factor.
Okay, thank you. All right, next one. Quebec is starting construction on May 11th and other provinces opening up. Why is Ontario not following suit? This is causing a distinct disadvantage to us in construction, as our contractors are all moving towards essential construction projects and ones within other provinces.
So we take all of our cues from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, and we have received some framework from him. All I'm going to say this morning is we know that people are anxious to re-engage and that we want a level playing field. And that's part of the reason we're having constant conversations with our counterparts federally and across the province. And I guess want to say stay tuned, and you'll likely see some alignment with some of the other provinces.
Great, thanks, Doug. Okay, we are working on making sure that our data is accurate before applying for the CEWS so that there would be no questions of eligibility if we were audited. Has there been a cap put on how much will be issued? And if we are a week or two behind other applicants, will there still be funds available for us?
So the only cap, and I'll let Doug step in a second, Shipley, the only cap that I've heard is on the amount that the employee will receive, and I think it's $847. So that's the only cap that I've heard. Now, in terms of eligibility, the program opened up a week ago Monday. Was it a week ago Monday, or was it this? I'm losing sight of dates.
It was this Monday. It was Monday the 27th.
Monday, right? And we know within the first day that there were 10,000 applications. They haven't put a limit on when the application process will stop. So, you know, making sure that all of your information is correct, I think, is a prudent and wise decision. And then that way you're not opening yourself up to any potential audits or disqualification of any of the payments. So I think that's prudent. But if there are any questions that anybody has, they can certainly call my office. But we haven't heard that there's a drop dead deadline date that the applications are going to stop, because they are, if you are eligible for the wage subsidy, then it is backdated right to March, April, May, and June as well. Doug Shipley, if you wanted to add anything else.
Yeah, thanks, John. I do not see, I grabbed the sheet, the document in front of me, so I'm reading from it. I don't see any cap on the total amount of dollar in that pool. The only caps are on the payments per week, which is a maximum of $847 per week per employee. But I don't see a cap on that. And the businesses, there is a set level of the business has to be between 20,000 and 1.5 million in total payroll of 2019 to also fit in there. But I don't see a cap on the amount of money that's been put in that pool right now.
See, and that was there's another example, just the limited range. When it first came out, the range of eligibility was much more protracted, if you want. And then, of course, hearing from business and others, I know we really pushed, and the advocacy again of the Chamber and CFIB really pushed to expand those limits and allow for that eligibility for those businesses to be much more flexible. And as a result, more employers are intending on taking advantage of the wage subsidy. And why the wage subsidy is important, again, is we want to maintain that connection between the employer and the employee, so that when things do start opening up, that the transition is much more seamless, rather than coming off of the CERB, you're already on the payroll and away you go. So that's the answer. I hope we answered it.
Sorry, John, Todd, if I could, there is one that I did not mention, that there has to show at least a 15% decline in revenue in March 2020. That's very important to keep note of.
There it is. Unmute myself. Okay. Let's see here. One was sent to me via text. It says, I'm in the residential construction industry, currently waiting to work on a project that has been started. Building permit is in place. However, it is in an occupied home. What are your thoughts on completing this project for this family so they can get their home back in order? The work can be done with social distancing in place. However, we are waiting for direction from the Premier on this. The neighbor next door is not happy with the work that has been going on, so we've stopped completely until we hear further whether we can continue or not.
Well, the first step is to check with the essential business list, and residential construction was allowed to proceed as long as you had your permit and your footings were in, which of course you can't get your permit, or you can't do your footings until your permit's issued. But as long as your footings are in and you're now working above grade, which I suspect this one is, it sounds like, there was no prohibition on stopping. Of course, following all the appropriate guidelines with social distancing and all the things that you're supposed to do. There are guidance documents on the ontario.ca site, but that's the short answer. If you're ever concerned about this kind of thing, Mayor Lehman, with his bylaw officers or the police, interact with them and just confirm with them so there's no misunderstanding. And if they think that there's an issue, they have a hotline that they can phone into the Solicitor General's office to clarify and work through it. So that if you're concerned, work with us and we'll get you to the appropriate spot.
Great, thanks, Doug. This next one will be geared towards Mayor Lehman, I'm sure, but I think it'll be of interest to everybody. It says, how is the Going Digital project in Barrie going? Are businesses taking advantage of it? Any idea how many businesses have elected to participate in the program? Is there a wait for these services? Are there any plans to enhance the offerings of the program? Is financial support available for e-commerce projects available? Mayor Lehman, I can go back point by point if you didn't digest it all.
I was going to say, I think that's 6 questions. It actually is. I'm just looking at it in the chat here.
Yeah.
So let me try and address at least a few of them. We've had about 70, 75 businesses that have started the process. I think about 40 have finished it, been through the assessment and are working on an ongoing basis. We'll be playing back some of the results of that program over the next few weeks. So I guess that answers the first 2 or 3 of those questions. Is there a wait for the services? No, the digital service squad is able to help you usually within a day or 2. You call in and they'll schedule an assessment, a virtual meeting with you to discuss your business and then look at the opportunities. So there's no real wait there. Are there plans to enhance the offerings of the program? Yeah, that's a great question. And then is there financial support? Well, there's no financial support at the municipal level. However, the assessment is free and we're paying for that. So when we set up the digital Main Street program, your first call, the first couple hours you spend talking to our advisors, there's no charge for that support. But if you get a company to help you build you a website, you have to pay that company. Although I would say, what we did was to pool the designers in Barrie, the web agencies. There's about 20 of them, actually a little bit more now, and many of them are working at considerably lower prices than normally, or they're working very fast to get you online quickly, so there's a much lower cost. The last part of that question was, are there any plans to enhance this? Yeah, I think as part of the recovery planning that I just talked about, it's at City Council on Monday, our planned process for building that plan and consulting with each of the sectors of Barrie's economy. I think it's a given that we will probably at least continue and hopefully expand that e-commerce program, because that's building long-term resilience for our companies in Barrie, and it's giving them another channel to continue to sell their goods and services. Still on mute, Todd.
Thanks, Jeff. Many small nonprofits and charities run on very tight budgets, relying on donations. There's a lot of support for places like the food bank that are helping people through this right now, and the smaller organizations are not getting the same support they typically would. Has there been any talk of a grant that may help these small nonprofits/charities after COVID so that they can still continue to provide their services to the communities? John, looks like you're waving.
Yeah, no, listen, there has been hundreds of millions of dollars that have been granted within the COVID-19 relief package that was approved by Parliament. In fact, just this past week, I know, for example, the shelters across the country, particularly the women and children's shelters, there are multi-million-dollar programs. We asked a question in the House of Commons this week, and the minister assured that the funding program has started. So we've asked for a list of who's received that funding. For example, I know that we've been advocating locally for the Barrie Women and Children's Shelters, but there are other organizations like food banks who should be eligible for some of this funding. And I know the other thing that we've done too through the Canada Summer Jobs Program is allocate some of the funding to these charitable organizations. Anybody that is an essential sector has received at least my priority, and I'm sure Shipley has done the same thing. There's also money that has been allocated to the United Way, for example, to provide support services for seniors, but there has been, as I said at the top of my comments, a significant amount of money that has been allocated towards the charitable and social sectors in this country. And so if anybody needs any information, they can certainly call us on that. Any specific information, we'd be glad to help. Shipley, anything else?
Yeah, thank you. And just in case anybody thinks, John and I have learned this through our last few things with the last names, because there's 2 Dougs.
Yeah.
We kind of started, just in case John's thinking we're getting really casual here, that kind of started.
There were 2 Jeffs, it would be Lehman and Tuckey, right? Like that's we've been on so many of these things, we figured it out.
Yeah. So no, not a lot to add, just some more on the specifics. Yes, the United Way funding was given $9 million, and that was given directly to the United Way to help local organizations to support practical services for Canadian seniors. The other program, Kids Help Phone, received additional funds, $7.5 million. The Emergency Community Support Fund, which John was talking about, received $350 million to support many different vulnerable groups. That's going out through charities and nonprofit organizations so they can continue to provide their services to those in need. So there has been additional funds through those organizations. And if you're needing to know more details on that or how to access them, you can get a hold of our office. And I would like to just mention that maybe this time, our office does remain, when I say open, it means staffed. We are not allowing walk-ins right now, but we are staffed. I do have staff remaining the phones and emails at all times. I know at the end of these, the chamber always puts out our contact information, so I won't take up valuable time right now by putting out my numbers and emails, and Todd's smiling, so he's happy with that. But our office does remain staffed. If you do have any questions, we've got caseworkers. We've even brought extra staff from our Ottawa office down here to support at the local constituency level. So we are trying and we are here as much as possible to assist everyone possible.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in on the NFPs, the not-for-profits. Some of the funding that the province has put forward is gone through the county to help the women's shelter, and directly through my ministry, we funded victim services of Simcoe County. So some funds are flowing to help those, but I think equally importantly, like Season Center did a fundraiser the other day with meals at home. I won't disclose what they raised. I don't know if it's public yet, but they did. It was an innovative way to do it. Not everybody can do it, that kind of fundraiser, but I think we are going to be into a challenging time where we need to support our local nonprofits who do really good work. And there are a bunch that do walks every year, and they raise money doing walks. And so that's obviously a challenge. Some like ALS are trying to do it in a different way. But look, contact our offices. We'll participate in any way that we can to help those organizations.
Thanks, Doug. And as Shipley said, because it's probably easier to say that too, you're right, John. As Shipley said, yeah, we will post everybody's contact info on this. All three levels of government are certainly there for everybody. They're accessible. Again, while their physical offices may not be open, they're certainly there to answer your questions, provide a little bit of relief. I know during this time, mentally, it can be difficult for a lot of people. This has been dragging on for 7 weeks now. People have questions, you want answers, don't hesitate to reach out to any of these offices. Everybody is here for you. With that, we'll go to the next question.
Can I just add one more quick thing? I'm sorry. So a little bit of a shameless self-plug here. My fellow politicians, we got a bit of a smile out of this one, but talking about the charities and work, and Doug Downey was exactly right. There are some innovative ways, and the RVH right now is trying to reach out and do some fundraising through their foundation. So they're doing everything they've asked for. I know myself, and I'm sure others, to come up with innovative ways that can be auctioned off. And there is opportunities right now. I don't know if it's up and going, but they can put forward a bid and have private one-on-one meetings. So if anybody does have a lot of questions about federal policy, one of the things RVH is offering is a 15-minute session with yours truly, MP Doug Shipley, over a meeting. So there is things like that are a little innovative. Sometimes my lack of own self-ego, I wonder who's going to want that 15 minutes, but hopefully it's someone other than my wife. So there is things like that out there. So RVH is trying to raise some funds. I'm sure the charities will do too, but it all has to be keeping social distancing in mind. So thank you.
And great point, Doug, and thank you. Because looking around at this motley crew here, I don't think they want to go with a calendar this year, so they'll probably skip out on that one. All right, next question. With the reopening of the province, will it be a very specific list of which sectors can open when, or will it be more in the form of a minimum safety requirements that you must meet, and businesses will be given the opportunity to determine their own capacity to meet those requirements?
Yes, it will be both. It will be both because we obviously the system was ratcheted down in a very methodical, very intentional way. And so it will be opened up in a very methodical, very intentional way, but always with the underlying safeguards. So even when an area or industries are given the green light, they still will be asked to and required to maintain minimums. The Ministry of Labor has put out several bulletins, which I equate to like a CRA bulletin, like a Canada Revenue Agency bulletin. They're fairly detailed. You can rely on them by sector. it won't cover every individual small sector, but some of them are broad stroke. But we're talking dozens of these for different areas to give guidance on what those minimum standards are. But yes, you will see some very specific pieces say, yes, we're comfortable with this. And as we do unlock things, the Chief Medical Officer of Health has been very clear that as you unlock things, we need to see the impact of that. So there will be some time lag so they can do an analysis before we go then to the next phase. So you'll see it in pieces, but very intentional. And Todd, just while I have the mic, I have to run for something at 11. So I apologize for coming in late and leaving early. Terrible guest. But,
Understood.
But thank you for that. And again, any follow-up questions, they can contact me after as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. And yeah, for those of you whose questions we don't get to, the Chamber will endeavor to get the answers and get them back to you. With that, we're going to get into our wrap up, and I'm going to start with, again, thanks, Doug Downey. I'm going to start with John Brassard, because I know, John, you have to get to something too. So if you want to give a couple of quick closing remarks.
Yeah, I just, and again, thank you, Todd. I do have our daily leadership team conference call at 11 o'clock that I have to get to. You know, as I said off the top, we are hearing some encouraging news with respect to numbers, at least locally. But we all have to still remain diligent, because you know, we don't want to be in a position where, especially where there's talk of the economy starting to open in certain sectors and certain fragments, we want to make sure that we don't run the risk of putting up barriers to that. So it's critical. I know that there has been a tremendous amount of anxiety that has occurred over the course of the last 7 weeks since this pandemic really took root in this country and across North America, and we will definitely work through them. There will be challenges. There are no questions about the challenges that we're going to be facing at all levels, municipally, provincially, and federally. But in typical Canadian fashion, we will work through this together, and we will make sure that we do the right things so that we can help individuals and businesses across this country to prosper going forward, but more importantly, to find a level of success coming out of this. And I do want to say that it will be, in large part, the power of Canadian business, the power of the Canadian economy that will cause us to exit out of this successfully. And we all have to continue to work together to make sure that we do that. So I want to thank you, Todd. Thanks, Jeff and Shipley and Downey, for being part of this and for inviting me again today. And as always, my office is open it's not open to traffic, people-to-people traffic, but we are staffed both here in Ottawa. If you need any help at all, 705-726-5959. The email is john.brassard@parl.gc.ca. And of course, our website, johnbrassard.com, has really been, we've really tried to make sure that that's a one-stop shop for people to get as much information as they can, not just at the federal level, provincial, and in some cases, municipal information as well. So I want to thank you for having me today, and have a good weekend, everybody. It's supposed to be beautiful, but remember, we still have to socially distance. But thanks again for having me, Todd.
Great, thanks, John. We appreciate your time. With that, over to Mayor Lehman. Closing remarks, Jeff.
Thanks. I'll keep it super short. Thanks to all of you out there in the business community who are already contributing your ideas to recovery. Please watch for more online next week about this. We are going to consult very broadly with the whole community for ideas and with specific sectors, and we could use your help in building that local plan for recovery. And I guess just a general message to everybody, the case numbers were just released at 10:30. Doug Downey was referring to them. They are down. It's a good sign. And I think we are in the downslope of this and can look ahead in the weeks and months to come to opening back up. But life is going to be different. And we're all going to work together to see what we can do to reopen our businesses successfully and reopen our economy. So thanks very much as well to the Chamber for organizing.
Great, thanks, Jeff. All right, last but not least, MP, Mr. Shipley.
Thanks, Todd. I'll keep this very short also too. There's not much I can add from a federal level that John didn't already say, but I would just like to give a personal message out to everybody to remind them to take care of themselves. This is a stressful time. I know there's a lot of anxiety. If you're not looking after yourself, it's going to be tough to look after your business when you come back. So please, there are some extra resources out there for mental health. We want to make sure everybody's looking after themselves. That's going to be obviously the most important thing. So stay safe, everybody. There is a light at the end of the tunnel now. And thank you to Todd and the Chamber for putting this together. I look forward to seeing everybody out someday soon. Continue to social distance, and we will all get through this. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the time of all the panelists. I know everybody's busy. Lots to do, lots to move on to. But in closing, again, thank you to everyone for joining us and for the work you're doing in your businesses every day. We urge every leader in the community to immediately shift the focus to the singular objective of slowing the pace of the transmission of this coronavirus. Our federal, provincial, and municipal governments have enacted measures that will only be effective if all employers step up and do their part to protect our health and welfare. All levels of government have expressed a commitment to protect businesses, employers, employees, and everyday Canadians to ensure that we can all come through this together. The Barrie Chamber and Sandbox are here to help you through this. Please feel free to email or call if you have any questions, concerns, or comments. We implore everyone to please shop local. We need you more now than ever to help all our local businesses, whether it's a takeout from a restaurant, a gift certificate, every little bit is going to help someone in some way. And then lastly, and as important as everything else, we strongly urge everybody to stay home as much as possible. We also ask people, please don't go up to the cottage. Don't carry the spread of this virus up into cottage country. The hospitals and grocery stores up there, they are not equipped at this time of year for this type of influx, and they'll become dangerously overwhelmed, you know, if they get a mass influx and if people get sick, accidents, injuries, anything like that. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in and participating. This will be available on YouTube. And it's interesting, we're finding we're getting more hits on the actual YouTube than those physical participants here, which is great because people are paying attention. They want to know what's going on out there. And again, to both of you that are still remaining here, thanks very much, gentlemen. We appreciate your input and your participation on behalf of the Chamber and the Sandbox. Everybody have a great day.